Welcome everybody to this webinar on the digital waste audit. Our love of modern electronics is helping kill these beautiful animals, the Western lowland gorillas. There is a material which is used in many electronics called coltan, and 80% of the resources of coltan are found in the area, in the habitat of these gorillas in the Congo area. And our hunger for this material is essentially destroying their habitat. So the impact of our obsession with technology has a direct impact on many of the beautiful animals and species in our world. On an average basis or whatever, in 2019, just in the UK market, the amount of materials that were mined, the raw materials, the rare earth materials that were mined to create mobile phones that were sold in the UK was the equivalent of the weight of over 7,000 double-decker buses. Enough water was used to fill 72,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And the CO2 emission was the equivalent of 664,000 cars driving for a year. So there's a real impact, and most of the impact of modern electronics, our computers and our mobile phones, most of the CO2 impact occurs during its production. The actual transfer of data is relatively little in the overall impact of the devices that we love. So one of the areas in building an audit that we would want to be looking at is how we, number one, look after our devices, and in particular how long we keep them for, because the longer the better. And then of course, when they are at the end of their life cycle, how do we recycle them? Less than 20% of electronics is recycled. Some estimate around 12%. And what often happens in these electronics is that they are collected, the electronics, the computers and the smartphones that are old in the rich countries are collected, and they are then sent back to places like Africa, poor countries, where they end up in dumps. So we hide our problems. So we go to these countries and we take the raw materials and pay people very little for those raw materials, and destroy the natural habitats of these wonderful gorillas and others. And then when we're finished with our products, we put them in big containers and we send them back to these countries to pollute and destroy the habitats even more, and the environments for people. So, that's probably something we should be more aware of in the so-called rich world. Holding on to our phones is a key and vital thing in our computers. So if we held on to our phone, sold it after 2 years, then the equivalent impact of the amount of water per year would be 6,380. We hold it for 3 years, 4,000, 4 years, 3,000, 5 years, 2,500. So holding it for 5 years versus 2 years significantly reduces the impact that it is having on the actual environment. The carbon footprint, it takes roughly around 60 kg, or creates roughly around 60 kg of pollution making a mobile phone. So if we keep it for 3 years, so 2 years, the carbon footprint is 36 kg, 3 years is 26, 4 years. So if we keep that phone for 5 years, then the carbon footprint is significantly reduced down to 18 kgs a year. So the longer we hold on to our electronics, the smaller the impact we have on the environment, because most of the pollution in our electronics is caused during its manufacture, during its mining and its production. Producing chips is a much more energy intensive process than producing other sort of devices. So if we're auditing, we're looking at things like this. Data, the other side, that even though data is right now the smaller element and transmission of data, data is absolutely exploding. So we are now into zettabytes of data. 1 zettabyte of data would require 20 trillion trees to print out. So there's only 3 trillion trees left on the planet. So you'd need to have 7 times the amount of trees that are already that are left on this planet to print out just 1 zettabyte. Now, Statista estimated by 2020 we'd be at 47 zettabytes. Other people are saying by the end of this year we'll be up to 60 zettabytes of data, and by 2035 over 2,000 zettabytes. These are unimaginable quantities of data. To store 2,000 zettabytes would cost about $58 trillion, so enormous quantities. 90% of this data is never accessed 3 months after it's stored. So if we were storing only 10% of this stuff, we wouldn't need to be buying near as many servers. We wouldn't need to be buying near as much electronics. It would be an all-round positive. So it's not about not having phones and not having data, but if we could focus on the waste in the process. So 90% of data never accessed, 80% of data never accessed, interactive archive, 90% of data not analyzed. Loads of research showing that a huge amount of our activities are very wasteful in the data environment. We create data with very little value. So how do we create a different sort of model, an earth experience model, where we really begin to focus on the needs of the planet and all life on the planet, as well as our needs, that we take into cognizance, we create a cost to the earth. So this phone costs you $600, but it actually costs the earth $1,200. You know, that we know the cost, the overall cost, and what does how much does it cost the lowland gorillas making this phone, etc. So in doing this audit, and it is new, and so there's a lot of room for improvement, and great to hear feedback on what's missing, etc. in the process. But I've isolated 9 areas that should be audited, and I'm going to look at each one of them now. The first one is cultural. The second is communities and more online communities. I'm looking at the digital space. Third, looking at working from home, our computers and smartphones, which I've touched on, website design, app design, metadata and information architecture. You may wonder, well, what has that got to do? Yeah, but it actually has a lot to do with a positive environment, so to speak, as I'll explain. Data in general, running through all of this environment, and our habits and ways by which we communicate. So this is what I believe are 9 areas that we should audit if we want to see where we are at the moment and how can we get better. So none of this is about saying let's stop having technology. I love technology. I've spent my entire career in technology. So I don't want to get rid of my mobile phone. I just want to use it better and not be as destructive of the actual planet in using these things. And I think we can have it both ways, and we can use technology intelligently so that it is benefiting and is reducing waste rather than creating waste. Culture, as with everything, is by far the most important area, the culture of the organization. We have a culture of waste, and we particularly have a culture of waste in technology. Most people, we just, for most of my career, every 2 years, I change my phone, change my computer, never even thought about the issues of e-waste or data waste. And I think we've always copying things, always creating redundancies. We're very, very wasteful. We've a very, very wasteful mindset in the technological space. When I was looking over the years in working with organizations and trying to identify I knew the organizations I worked with that did a good job, that whose data was tended to be clean, who had good searchable intranets, who had relatively small websites, that you could find what you needed. They did a good job. They were professional. And then I said, well, what sort of organizations were they? And then I looked at the organizations that had horrible websites, that had hundreds of thousands of pages and 90% of them out of date and not updated, etc. Well, a key characteristic of the really good organizations were that they tended to work in multidisciplinary cross-functional teams, and that the organizations that were very poor at managing data and created a lot of crap and a lot of waste were very silo-based. Because what you would find in the silo-based is that the silos would, we've got our own copies of the HR policies because we don't trust HR or stuff like that. And you'd find multiple copies all over in different departments of this sort of documentation and that sort of documentation that would be duplicated. So silos tend to be wasteful in a digital environment. And the most efficient environments that I found the least wasteful were multidisciplinary cross-functional teams. I remember working years ago with the Norwegian Cancer Society, where they initially had about 50 people contributing part-time to the website, and it was very silo-based, and they had 5,000 pages. And then they went to a new model where they had only 4 or 5 people, and these 4 or 5 people from each representing the major silos, research and promotions and the various different aspects. And it went down to 1,000 pages because they noticed that, hey, you've got a definition of melanoma over here, we've got it here, we've got it here. They were creating all this duplicative content. So when they started working collaboratively, they greatly reduced the quantity of content and reduced waste in the process. So wherever I've seen real success, I've seen multidisciplinary behavior and cross-functional teams. Another key and crucial element is responsibility. Wherever you have responsibility for what is up in the digital environment, full responsibility, you have a well-kept environment. Where responsibility only ends at publication or launch, you have a very poorly maintained and wasteful environment. So a key auditing thing in looking at an audit is to look at, are people truly responsible for this thing? Are they looking after it? Are they reviewing it? Is it traceable? Can you trace content? We talked today about meat and stuff like that. Can you trace it back? Can you trace the content and code back to the creator? And are they responsible for that? And will they address issues in that? So another element was around reuse of the stuff. Organizations that encouraged reuse were by definition more environmentally friendly. So where there's incentivization or a culture that says to reuse things, and connected with that is a culture of sharing, where it is a career enhancing thing to be a person who shares stuff rather than who hoards stuff. Because in traditional organizations, you are judged by what you create. Whether the app is crap, once you launched it, we launched an app, and that moves my career forward. And the clever person moves on to another position before the app crashes and burns out 6 months later in the process. So we have models that incentivize waste creation. in most organizations. And one of the key cultural changes is to create organizations that encourage and reward sharing and reuse. So the audit in the cultural area will look at how does the organization encourage reuse of various things, and how does it encourage and reward and incentivize staff and employees who want to share what they have created, the code and tools, etc., that they have created. The communities, basically healthy communities tend to be a good reflection of collaboration and that it's working well. So, and a key audit of a community is if they're moderated. If they're not moderated, it's a red light sign. It's very rare will you find healthy communities that are not moderated in some way. So things that you'd look at as well would be the number of posts and the response rate to the posts. So how many posts people putting up, asking questions or otherwise have had zero responses? How many, the general activity, how many community have had no posted, nothing posted them in 6 months. These will be red signs of this is a waste environment. There's waste. This is a dump. It's not a community, it's a dump in the process. And this, of course, the community is the engine of the sharing and the engine of the reuse in organizations. And of course, looking at search in this environment as well can tell you something about how the organization cares about findability and reuse within the environment. Archiving and deletion. Communities often have very time limited content, you know, that it goes out of date quite quickly in certain communities. And is that archived properly? How is it dealt with? And the stuff that needs to be deleted, how is it deleted in the process? Work from home, we know it's a huge area at the moment. You know, the quality training about getting the best. There's a number of things about working from home, about, you know, getting a good setup, energy training on you know, looking after your computer, turning it off, you know, also the little things about, you know, transferring data. Wired is a much more energy efficient way to transfer data than Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is much more energy efficient than 3 or 4G. So there are lots of little techniques and training and that, you know, good quality equipment and support for issues, because they create blockages in the process, and bandwidth and those issues. So this is not about being, you know, negative and taking people away. It's about creating an efficient environment and reducing waste within the environment. So that's work from home. This is just a sample of some of the things that we'd be looking at in this audit. The computers and smartphones, you know, have they been purchased based on minimum specs and maximum energy ratings? We often over-specify. So, and what happens if we over-specify or over-spec? Well, we're creating more energy. The higher the specs, the higher the energy consumption in the environment. So we often create devices that are twice as powerful as the person actually needs to do their job. So they're wasting twice as much energy as they need to waste on an hourly basis. As long as possible, and repair, a very important flag in that will be the warranty process. Warranties have major impacts on organizational behaviors in relation to how long they'll hold on to devices. Is there proper recycling at the end? As I said, at a maximum, 20% is recycled, probably more like 10% in the process. And the recycling is often very, very poor as well. So we really need a massive change in our approach to recycling. You know, just large screens and multiple screen environments. There's loads of things we can do. The smaller the screen, the less the energy impact in the process. Website design, just going to touch, there's a ton of stuff under this. I'm just going to show just a few, you know, setting weight limits, 2 megabytes or whatever we're going to set, page download limits, 2 seconds, just things on HTML. Generally speaking, HTML is the most optimal way, the least energy intensive way. I've done metrics or measures which show that publishing the same content in a PDF versus in HTML, the PDF was 3 times heavier in the process. So HTML has the potential to be a very efficient way, energy efficient way to actually publish data, and publishing as much in HTML as possible. So written cleanly, with unnecessary code and spacing, even the simple things. Every space, a blank space, is a byte. So reducing spacing, particularly when you're talking about, massive number of visits, etc., to a particular page, can, add up in its, energy consumption. So there's a ton of stuff under website design: CSS, JavaScript, etc., images, custom fonts, etc. There's loads of stuff. I'm just touching on some of the stuff that would be looked at in a design audit from an environmental and a waste point of view. App design, a lot of looking at use and how the app impacts the energy, because there's 2 types of energy use that we should focus on: the use of the energy in the creation of the thing, the design of the website or the app, and then the energy use as the website or app is being consumed by the person. Updates kept to a minimum. Energy optimization features such as dark mode, it can reduce energy by maybe 30% battery consumption. An app facilitate, the more progressive apps are time-based energy consumption optimization, looking at peak times of when electricity is being used, etc. There's a lot of clever stuff that can be done. So metadata. Why is metadata important? Well, without good metadata, you can't have good sharing, and you can't have good reuse in the process. So poor metadata has all sorts of indirect impacts. Like a lot of the reason why people send a lot of attachments is because they don't trust that what they're sending will be found on the internet or otherwise. And the reason they don't trust it is because there's poor metadata and poor management of the information architecture space. So metadata training, if you cannot share if you don't do good metadata in the process. Mandated to create metadata for content they publish on the web. Comprehensive, well thought through and rigorously tested classification. Good classification system is a foundation to a good digital environmental strategy in the process. And generally, task-based classification tends to be more efficient than org chart because it's easier, it's more intuitive in the process. So there's a number of things under metadata and information architecture. Data itself. The most energy efficient data storage solution chosen for various types of data. So there's, depending on whether they call hot storage and cool storage and archival storage, it can be up to 150 times more energy efficient, different types of actual storage. So if you know that you've got stuff that is going to be rarely accessed, then you can place it in more cold storage type of environments, which have a much lower energy impact. So there's a lot of decisions and thinking we can about figuring out our data environment and which is hot, which is cold, which is archival, and when, etc. in the process. So archiving is connected with that. Security policy, and one of the issues that's coming up now a lot with work from home is that, as these laptops, etc., come to the end of their life, how do we clean them properly and get rid of all the data from those laptops before they're sold on or otherwise? So impacts there, and privacy, of course, coming through as well. Generally, as a policy which is good for privacy and good for the environment and good for other people, is only collect the absolute minimum. Most of the stuff we track and we collect on people is of no benefit, no real benefit, and it creates burdens of privacy and burdens of energy consumption, etc. in the process. Communication. So training in place of how best to communicate, sending emails when you shouldn't send emails, setting up calls, meetings, etc. There isn't nearly enough good training in that in the process. And dealing with well-being of a lot of this will help. Not just it's good for the health of the planet. Right, but this is good for the health of the organization. A cleaner, simpler organization will be more efficient, but it'll also be good for the health of the employees within that organization, less being smothered by redundant emails, etc., and redundant content. Presentation and document templates fully optimized. Somebody was saying to me a couple of weeks ago, their presentation, one of their presentation templates was 5 megabytes. Before they put anything into it, it was 5 megabytes in actual weight. Online videos, using them appropriately in the an hour of audio with 2 people takes up about 30 megabytes. It creates about 30 megabytes of data. An online video, it creates about 300 megabytes of data. So policies of where you might have video for the first 5 minutes and then going to audio, that will have a significant saving. And as somebody said to me just this morning, it'll also reduce stress. A lot of people don't want to be on screen for the full hour. It's enough to be on screen for the first couple of minutes in the process. So how will this be carried out? Well, here's how I envisage, let's say, if we were looking at an internal, an intranet, internal type of systems environment. First, there'd be a series of manager interviews, then either employee surveys or interviews, and actual auditing. So some of the things can only be discovered through actual analysis of looking at the ratios, the response ratios in the communities, etc. So certain things need to be actually analysed and certain things need to be in an interview process. So the interview process with the key managers asking questions like, do people tend to work in multidisciplinary cross-functional teams? So here this has questions are given weights. The maximum weight is 100 for a particular question. Then the optimal score is 5. From 0 to 5. So they get a score of 0 to 5, and then these are all calculated up. So there's loads of these questions. Are people encouraged to think twice before they create, whether code, content, or emails? That's sometimes the best thing is to do nothing. Is that the culture, or is it not? And then practically the same questions asked of employees, either in a sit-down or a survey type format. Do you tend to work in multidisciplinary cross-functional teams, etc., in the process? So there would be the manager and the employees. Then the actual audit within the environment, looking at the communities, the moderation, the active versus inactive, the response rates of posts, the website and apps, detailed analysis of maybe 10 to 20 pages and looking at the CSS and the different pages and the distincts and analyzing HTML and JavaScript and CSS and all the components that can create waste. Are they downloading entire JavaScript files for every page, whereas you only need 5% for this particular page? So therefore the other 95% is waste. So looking out for wasteful activities at each step of the actual design process. Metadata, looking at whether there's quality metadata for all the content, the navigation and the classification structure. How is the search designed and actually working? Looking at data, what are the storage strategies and policies? How is archiving and dealt with? How is deletion dealt with? Most environments do not, they carry all this crap year after year after year, and there's practically no strategy to either archive or delete the environment. So communication usage, email usage, online meetings and templates and various other things, what's actually happening in that specific space. That is basically, I think that, and then there'd be all of these would be calculated up, and you'd get scores from A to E in the process. That's a quick run through. If you're interested in hearing more, or perhaps running it within your organization, or partnering in helping develop this further, or you got questions, please feel free to get in touch. Now I'll open it up to questions, and see. Let me see. Can I just want to unlock. Yeah. So that I already have some questions, I believe. So here it is. Stuart, so please ask questions. Now time for questions. So if people keep their mobile phone for 5 years, aren't they in danger of having a handset that is not supported by the latest version of operating systems, and therefore security risk? I think there's a, yeah, I think Stuart, we have in a world that where there's deliberate planned obsolescence. We're in this crazy world where it's structured so they're forcing us either by draining the batteries, or doing all sorts of underhand things to force us to get rid of our phones quickly. I don't know about. I'm certainly going to find out. I'm hanging on. Like, I only really all this stuff only really dawned on me about 2 or 3 years ago. My phone is about 3 years old now, and I'm going to hold on to it as long as I possibly can. And I think if we start demanding and of our politicians, unfortunately, we have got to really get our act together as people on this. This won't happen. Certainly, Apple and Samsung, etc., are not going to change and not going to change this very profitable model. We really need a big cultural and societal change where we start holding on to things and wanting to repair things, and wanting and demanding that we can repair things. And I think if we start doing that and get in touch with our politicians and etc., there are a number of movements. But yes, maybe, and it's probably deliberate. They deliberately design it to be a security risk after 5 years. Of course, there will be no documents to prove that. But these are the areas I think we've got to change. We get rid of stuff far too quickly. That's the underlying crisis on a global basis. We create far too much waste far too quickly. So Ben, do we get the presentation? Yeah, sure, Ben. You can have the presentation. No problem. I'll make it available. Jamie's saying, is there a formula where we can equate data use to energy use? Yeah, I've been working on, and there are a number of areas. There's an excellent thing called the website Carbon Calculator out there from Whole Grain Digital, a wonderful company doing really brilliant things. There's a load of these calculators beginning to emerge. I think it's still, early days on this, but there are. I was trying to work on calculators as well. Look at the entire cost. I think, wouldn't it be great if we said, oh, this iPhone cost you 900 euros, and it cost the Earth 2,000 euros. It costs Lola and Gorillas their future. It costs, etc. That we calculate the cost to the Earth, not just the cost to us, because these are the hidden costs. Like, imagine if we had things like, this plastic bottle of Coca-Cola costs 70 cents, but the cost to the Earth is 7 euros, because it's going to last for 1,000 years, and it's going to kill a load of fish, etc. in the process. We only cost things based on very, very narrow things. So I think there are some of those formulas out there, Jamie, and I think we need a hell of a lot more of them. We need an economics of the Earth, and a lot of people are talking about these issues around degrowth. So I think there's movements, but there's so much more work that needs to be done in this space. Neil is asking, for a mobile phone, what percentage of the life cycle carbon footprint is from manufacturing? I guess it will be a very different answer for servers. Well, they say, Neil, that on average, modern electronics, so in other words, with silicon chips, chip-driven electronics, on average, about at least 60% and up to 85% of the energy is in the manufacture. So most of the pollution occurs at manufacture. Now, when you combine that with short life cycles, that is the ultimate destructive model of the planet. So you're creating an incredibly destructive model where most of the pollution occurs during the manufacturing process, and the product that's manufactured is being replaced at a very short life cycle. So that's an extraordinarily damaging. And if you look at the explosion in planetary destruction, it began in the 70s. Not surprisingly, with the real growth of the modern chip-based technology industry, you could draw a connective line with the rise of modern computers and the rise of destruction of increases in CO2s, massive increases in use of raw materials, massive increases in waste. And by waste, I mean is stuff that cannot be used by the natural environment in the process in its current form. So James is asking here, New York Times, around 50% of the data is JavaScript. What needs to be done to get website developers to recognize the environmental impact of so much wasteful code? Well, that's a big thing, yeah. And it may be, if the JavaScript is being used, see, what happens a lot, James, is that JavaScript is sent down in packets. So you create, because it's simpler, it's developer convenience. So all the JavaScript gets sent down that any page might use in a single packet to every page. So even if some pages don't need any JavaScript, they still download the JavaScript. Also, in a larger sense, this is probably not true of the New York Times, but I'd say a good 80% of websites do not need to be database driven. They do not have a need to constantly be updating their pages. Now, what that means is you can have a static website, so you can get rid of a load of stuff of coding and database calling, etc. But we just don't think about these issues because we're constantly going for the convenience and not recognizing the issues and the impacts in the planet. And these impacts, they're all fractional. They're not significant, but they all add up together because we've got 1.8 billion pages and we're creating zettabytes of data now. Yes, 1 gigabyte of data creates very little impact as it's been transferred. But, you know, there's, I don't know, a trillion gigabytes in a zettabyte, or 100 trillion. It's some mind-blowing issue. So thinking about these issues and approaching these issues, one good thing that New York Times said they're reducing tracking as much as they can and getting rid of cookies and stuff like that. But yeah, there's so much we need to do in this space of education, and that we all can do our part to help a better planet for our children and their grandchildren. Nikki here, hi Nikki. Will companies be able to customize interview questions? I can see managers and employees wanting to gather data on the effectiveness of internal programs that are labeled green. Absolutely. I mean, this is just starting out. This, Nikki, it's really open for evolution and for, of course, customization in the process. I think I said I'm now working really actively with NetLife Research, a wonderful company in Norway, who really want to orient themselves and become a kind of an earth experience type consultancy. So, you know, they're looking at it. I'm sure they'll make loads of changes. So it's very much a work in progress. And basically, if anybody wants it, you know, I'll make it available. Feedback, if you can take it and use it. It's basically open source to use if you want to use it yourselves as well. And true, you're right. New York Times and all that JavaScript. Yeah, there's too much JavaScript out there. We're really over engineering things. Uh, Angela's saying, I think she's incredibly interesting. Thank you. Inspired to incorporate concepts into my line of work, service and UX design in a commercial bank. Will need to step out as it's quite late. Okay, so, thanks, Angela. That's great. Neil saying, maybe not a question, but I think the exponential impact of the environment since the 70s is more correlated to access to cheap energy. Well, that's probably, yeah, there's a number, certainly access to cheap energy has had a huge, but something exploded. But then in the 70s we went through the energy crisis, but definitely then we come out of the energy crisis and went back in. But something began to happen in the 70s where all the meters of every sort of use, and I know of course there's the rise of China, the massive consumption, but all the meters everywhere exploded from the 70s onwards. And the whole story that computer tells us is that it's more efficient. So where are the efficiencies from computer technology? I don't see them when I look back. Most of the intranets I look at, 90% of the systems are crap. You've got 4 or 5 training systems. They don't work well. Most enterprise design is absolutely horrible. I think we've been getting away in the technology industry with a massive lie and a kind of great train robbery, saying that we're wonderful and we're efficient. I think we contribute to massive inefficiencies in economies rather than actual efficiencies. Wondering if B Corp could be used. Yeah, I think the idea of the B Corporation, is a very interesting, where there's standards. I don't know if everyone is familiar. The B Corporation, search it up on Wikipedia. Where we have standards and models of companies reaching certain standards. I think there's a lot of cultural change and consciousness arising today. How can we harness it, and how can we say, because I was thinking about, like, I've been in user experience and all, and I'm making it easier. Am I making it easier for people to consume? And when you look at, say, the Ryanair website or the Amazon website or other websites, and you say, well, is that all? Digital is often an accelerant of other industries, like fast fashion. Now, many fashion houses have 24 seasons a year. You could not have 24 seasons a year without digital technology, without Apple computers, etc., without Instagram promoting all these fashions. Digital is often an accelerant of waste, and it accelerates very wasteful, disposable thinking in the process. How do we gradually change that cultural mindset, whereas digital becomes a supporter of a conservation, reuse and sharing mindset? I think we can do it, but it's a major cultural challenge, and let's hope we're going to be up to that over the coming years. So Ben is asking here, is there a tool to count the total weight of a website? Yeah, there is a lot of really good tools. Google Lighthouse has excellent tools in Chrome that analyzes pages. And there's lots of, I can't think at the moment, but there's web page weight analyzers. There's loads of tools out there. If you do a bit of search, Ben, where you'll get, and they'll analyze the various weight breakdowns of a page. How much is JavaScript? How much are custom fonts? How much are images, etc.? Of course, images and videos are where a lot of the explosion in weight has actually occurred. Any further questions before we call it a day? That looks like it. Thanks very much for attending this. Please spread the word, and I hope you're all well in these difficult times, and let's be hopeful that 2021 will be a better year, and that also we'll have learned lessons that that we as humans are putting a lot of stress on this planet, and pandemics are some of the symptoms of that stress in the process, and that there'll be a lot more to come for us and for our children and for their children if we don't radically change the way we live. So thank you.